Hello again, everybody. This is Brother Chooch for Thinking Out Loud about the End Times. This is Night Watch, a nighttime fellowship for those who are awaiting the soon return of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, to pull us out of this jungle gym of sin and take us into the clouds, where we will see Him face to face for the first time and be changed, and then to take us to the place that He's been preparing for us for about 2,000 years, thus will be with the Lord forevermore. Thank you so much for joining Night Watch. As always, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be your host, and I realize that your time is precious, and so by you tuning in, uh, to me that tells me that you're interested in the subject, and perhaps you enjoy also the fellowship that takes place on Night Watch and channels such as this. So tonight we're going to talk about something that I've been a fan of for probably 10 years, and that's the Revelation 12 sign. And personally speaking, I've been a fan of the Revelation 12 sign when I first heard about it. And when that time, when the Revelation 12 sign did take place up in the heavenlies on September 23rd, 2017, I believe that there was a very good chance that the rapture could take place on that day because that sign, which I still believe to be such an incredible sign, was present that day, and it seemed to fit so nicely with Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And when the day came and went, I was, to say the least, disappointed. However, the Revelation 12 sign has never escaped my interest, and the question came after that period of time is, could the sign be pointing to particular distance in the future when the rapture would occur? And so um, a month or two later, 3 months later, 7 months later, 9 months later, a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and so on and so forth, always wondered, could the Revelation 12 sign, which seems to be uh, such a picture in which you would look at the rapture and the beginning of the tribulation period, that you would say it's got to be connected somehow. Now, I know a lot of people in the Watchman community disregarded the Revelation 12 sign, especially as time passed. But if you're a diehard such as I, and believe that the Revelation 12 sign was of God and was a sign and was pointing to something, then you're still in the game. You're still interested if this Revelation 12 sign uh, has meaning in pointing to a particular day or time, rather. I don't want to say day because that's going to get people all freaked out and upset. Like, you know, it's almost anathema in the Watchman community to say it could be pointing to a specific day. But if it's pointing to a area of time. So the Revelation 12 sign has resurfaced in the past month, and I would like to give credit to, I'll put his picture up here. This is, I got to get rid of my mug first before you could see him. Let's see here, here we go. This is Brother Patrick, and he has a channel called Hourly Watch, and he spends a lot of time looking at what is going on in the constellations, in the planets, in the stars, and relating them to the times that we're in. Now, Brother Patrick is an interesting brother to listen to. He's very optimistic, enthusiastic, hopeful about the soon return of the Lord, and he has a heart, really has a heart to evangelize and does a great job. He goes out and reaches homeless people, people down and out. He has a collection so he could make backpacks for the homeless. He has been spearheading passing out um, how to get saved tracts or little postcards, and have had probably hundreds of thousands of them passed out that are invitation to the wedding supper of the Lamb. So he's a brother who loves the Lord very, very much. And I believe, sadly, that his wife has passed away at a relatively young age from cancer. I believe that's what happened. So it's very sad what this brother went through, but to his credit, even going through an incredible trial, such as losing your wife at a young age, or losing your spouse at any age, is not a fun thing for sure. It's a crisis, a disaster, a broken heart, and he went through that and continued his service unto the Lord, and continued making videos, continued doing what he does. Now, in his channel, he presented some pretty interesting things about the Revelation 12 sign, and we'll get to that in a minute or two. But before we get to that, one thing that you need to know concerning the Revelation 12 sign of what he's going to be speaking about in 2023, you need to know a little bit about asteroids, believe it or not. Asteroids are assigned a number and eventually will be given a name. Now let me just read this. This is from Psi ESA International, and this is in regards to asteroid numbers and names. The naming of an asteroid is the final step of a long process which may take decades to complete. It starts when the asteroid is first observed on 2 consecutive nights by one observer. These results are then sent to the Minor Planet Center of the International Astronomical Union, IAU, which assigns a provisional designation. This is usually a serial number such as 1992 KD. The provisional designation includes the year of its discovery, followed by 2 letters that give the order of its discovery during that year. Objects discovered between the 1st and 15th of January are designated in order of their discovery, AA, AB, AC, and so on. Those discovered between the 16th and 31st of January are given the letters BA, BB, BC, and so on. The final discoveries of the year between the 16th and 31st of December have designations in the series YA, YB, YC. The letter J is not used. For example, 1992 KD would have been the 4th asteroid discovered during the second half of May of 1992. So you get the pattern there of how they do this. Asteroid moons are given different designations. For example, S/1998 45-1 is the first satellite of asteroid 45 to be discovered during 1998. Now that sounds pretty complicated if you ask me. Once the provisional designation is given, a search for former observations of the asteroid is done. Different sightings of the same asteroid may have led to it being given many provisional designations over time. When there's enough information to calculate an accurate orbit, a permanent number is assigned to the asteroid. The Minor Planet Center in the United States currently has records on the orbits of some 57,000 asteroids and 1,050 comets. In 1999 alone, 25,000 new asteroids and 60 comets were discovered, but most of these have been observed frequently enough for their orbits to be calculated with any accuracy. About only 10,000 of the best observed objects which have fairly well-known orbits, have been given permanent numbers. An asteroid with a permanent number will eventually be given a name. The astronomer who first provides enough observations to calculate the orbit with precision has the privilege of choosing the name because they are the discoverer. However, the discoverer is not necessarily the first observer of the asteroid. The proposal is submitted to the Small Bodies Names Committee of the International Astronomical Union and then makes it official whether the proposal is considered to be acceptable. So that's the process in which asteroids get their names and their numbers. Now, the reason I went through that is because as you're going to see the graphic that goes up, you're going to notice some numbers and you're going to notice some names. So I don't want you to be scratching your head and say, what's that? Those are asteroids that have been given an official name and have been given a number. Now, if you're familiar with the Revelation 12 sign, the Revelation 12 sign back in September 23rd of 2017 had no asteroids in it that were mentioned. It basically involved the Sun, the Moon, Virgo, Leo, uh, three planets, the stars in Leo, and the Jupiter, which was going retrograde back and forth in the womb of Virgo, and then for 9 months, and then came out on the 23rd. So that pretty much fit the description as mentioned in Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. This year, in 23, during the time of Rosh Hashanah, we're going to see what Patrick has shared. But before we get to that, even Robert Breaker, as we know, he is a Bible teacher who has quite a following. His channel, I guess, consists of the Cloud Church. And he went over this. And it sounds like based on him watching Hourly Watch, just kind of shared with his viewer similar information. And to Robert Breaker's credit, he didn't say that this is definitely something or definitely not something. And tonight we want to just kind of explore the question, is this something or is this not something? And I'm going to pose some questions later for you to kind of chew and marinate in that for a bit. So Robert Breaker covered this, and of course he got a lot of hits about it. Poor Patrick's channel's a lot smaller than Robert Breaker, but I just want to make sure that this brother gets the credit, or we could chase him down if this doesn't amount to anything. But that last part I'm kidding, of course. So this is what he posted here. Let me pop it up. There it goes. This is his graphic, and it seems pretty complicated, but let me just explain briefly. He's basically got, again, around the time, I believe, I'm not sure if it's the exact date and time, but this is what you'll see if you have stellarium and you could follow these things, or if you're able to see what's going on with a great telescope. This is basically what the scenery will look like around Virgo at a very significant time of year. Now you could see names pop up that seems to be connected with the Bible. Israel. There's a comet, not a comet. There's an asteroid named Israel. Lydia and Francis and Miriam, and even an asteroid named Yeshua, which certainly sounds like Yeshua. Now, what's remarkable about what is going to be happening soon is that, as you know, back in the original Revelation 12 sign, we had Jupiter in the womb, that square section in the middle of Virgo there, go back and forth like a baby going through the gestation period and then being delivered 9 months later. Now, what this has in this year doesn't have Jupiter doing that, and instead it has an actual asteroid that is named Child, which has gone through the womb and will be exiting on this Tuesday, September 19th of 2023. Now, again, as we look at this a little bit more closely, let's just adopt the view as watch persons that based on everything that's been going on the past 10 years or so, that we're not going to hold much weight to just saying things are coincidental. Not after what we've gone through. So I can't say, I mean, you have a free will to say, oh, this is just coincidental. But I'm just going from my own framework of looking at this, and I'm not going to conclude that this is consequential. This is something that I have to look at and say, um, it seems like the Lord has allowed this for what reasons? I can't say for sure, but He's allowed it. So the child is out on the state, and if you notice, underneath there is a another you have another asteroid called actually United Nations. Now, I have tried to go through and confirm the name of some of these. I do know that there is an asteroid named Child. I do know that there's an asteroid, which other one did I confirm? 666. And uh, by all means, and I didn't spend too much time, so I can't say that I have verified all the names of these asteroids. But I would challenge you, if you have the time or if you have the desire, to go and Google the asteroid, the number, and the name, and see what you find. See if it matches up. Now, what Brother Patrick did here, for some of them at least, he would, let's say, let's take a look at where it says child. So he has child. Let me see if I can make this just a little bit bigger for us. Sometimes I can and sometimes I can't. Let's see. There we go. Just a little bit bigger. It's probably more for me than for you. But if you look at Lydia, or you look at Child rather, let's look at Child. Child is an asteroid that's named 4580 or 0. And it means a cake or bread or a feast. So, and that's from the Strongs. So if you look at that, you look at the name of the asteroid, you look at the number in Strong's, a cake, a bread, or feast. Does that have any prophetic significance? United Nations, 6,000, and 6,000 in Strong's is trouble. Now, probably a good match, if you ask me, when considering the United Nations. And based the fact that the United Nations is doing some pretty significant stuff this month, maybe it's properly placed that this asteroid is there at this particular time of year. Now, if the asteroid United Nations could be in a million other spots right now at this snapshot in the future, but for whatever reason, and probably God's allowance, this is where the asteroid United Nations is, and this is where the asteroid 666 is, and this is where Mars is, and this is where Israel is, and so on and so forth. And when you look at all this, you say, wow, that's kind of crazy, right? Miriam and the moon, and I would hourly watch. He's got at least 3 videos on this, if not more. And he goes through and explains all this. And I'm not going to go into that because if you really want to hear it from, I guess, the originator of who found this. Uh, Tune into Hourly Watch. I would subscribe to his channel and just hear him out. So, anyways, the child comes out. You got the United Nations right there, and you got Yeshua kind of in that place of coming for the rescue, so to speak. And if you look to the right and lower side of the child, in front of the woman is Mars, which I believe Mars is a representation of Satan. And it's like Satan is before the woman looking to gobble up the child. And so if we look at Revelation chapter 12, we believe that in September 23rd, 2017, this aspect of the Revelation 12 sign had been fulfilled. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant, was crying out in birth pangs and agony of giving birth. Now notice in verse 3 it says, and another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns on his heads and 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, just like Mars is there, who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. And then if you continue to read, you could make argument that the male child is the church. But we're not going to go there. Okay, so could it be just trying to see if this is perhaps the second great sign being fulfilled up in the heavenlies, which it can be or cannot be? If Mars is coming in to swoop the child, and Yeshua comes and rescues the child before the dragon could come, that seems to be like a nice picture. And perhaps all the other names in the snapshot in time have significant meaning. And according to Patrick, he would go through all that and show that indeed this is the case. Okay, so actually, I don't make a good Revelation 12 sign, so let me shrink myself. And I'll put myself, let's say, in these yonder parts. So this looks complicated enough, but Patrick actually, let me see, I think he even added to that. So let me close that and then open the next one. Yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, this is he's added more. So he's obviously done more research. And there's asteroids Hebe, and that is definitely, and there's definitely an asteroid named that. Could that mean Hebrew? Could be. And if you look at this, he did a little bit more research using the Strongs and also some other asteroid names in there. And so it just gets a little bit more interesting and maybe a little bit more complicated. But we know that God is able to do something like this. Now, I can't say definitely if this is the second part of Revelation 12 sign or not, but considering the time of year this is happening, consider just the fact that you have a asteroid passing through this area named Child at the time of Rosh Hashanah. Just the fact that you have Mars, that most people would relate, those who look at the you know the these particular celestial signs in relation to the Bible. Mars is related to Satan, and then you have that asteroid, Yeshua, coming in for the rescue, to me, that's quite interesting for sure. Now, I have a couple questions myself because I know that I kind of use that philosophy where if something doesn't work out, then what do? You got to rule it out. And here's the tricky thing with this. If this doesn't necessarily mean that the rapture is going to happen this year. Uh, could this all be of God as a second warning used in the Revelation 12 sign? Absolutely. Could the first Revelation 12 sign have been pointing to a 6-year warning, and then when all this happens, the rapture happens uh, on the day of this? It could. But since I've gone through the Revelation 12 sign the first time and we didn't get raptured on that day, I still got to consider all this happening on that day does not mean the rapture is going to happen on that day, even though I very much hope so. And yes, I am biased for the rapture to occur and to happen, and I'd love for it to happen on this particular day. But I don't know that, and I can't say for sure, nor will I say for sure. So I go into this saying maybe yes, maybe no. Could this be a 1-year warning that the tribulation period or the rapture slash tribulation period is going to happen in the fall time frame of Rosh Hashanah in 2024? Maybe. But see, what we're going to do is we're just going to look at things the TOL way, and if the 19th comes and goes, we just simply say we are ruling out that the rapture happened on the same day that this celestial configuration took place. That does not mean that this is insignificant. It just means that the rapture didn't happen on that day, so we rule that out. See, we do not want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And that's not a good way to look at things because there's a lot of things that are prophetically significant, but it just doesn't simply mean that that particular sign or event uh, is pointing to the very day of the rapture. We don't know, but this could be another signpost on our journey to the rapture. So we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I haven't thrown out the Revelation 12 sign yet, and I have not thrown out the blood moon tetrad of 2014 and 2015. It would be, I think, not wise to do so. I believe that those are all signposts pointing to the end time events. As we know that there's going to be signs in the sun, in the moon, and in the stars. And the Lord has set all this in motion. The Lord knew that this particular asteroid in the future will be called Child. This was not called Child by God. This was called Child by whoever discovered this asteroid. God did not name these particular, with the exception of the sun and the moon, uh, these celestial bodies. He maybe has a different name for them, but he knew the name that man would tag on them. And so he very well, because of his sovereignty, because of his awesomeness, he sets things in motion, and he allowed, for his purposes, that this particular asteroid to be named Child, knowing very well that this asteroid Child would pass through a very significant constellation, which speaks of the Virgin in Revelation 12 at the time he wanted it to happen. This is like the Lord's divine clock that has all the gears in sync and in motion and working in such a way on his timing. And that makes it really, really interesting. So when you look at this and you say, okay, um, all these names, all these numbers all these things that have that similarity to the Revelation 12 sign. Could this be the Lord's way of communicating to us? At the very least, we are getting so close to that day that we're hanging our hope on, which is the day of the rapture. Now, there's a couple things I would like to say that is not trying to tear this apart, but it's just simply um, asking some questions. One is, unlike in September 23rd, 2017, there was three wandering planets, which coupled with the stars in Leo made up the um, 12 uh, stars of the crown on the woman's head. Those three wandering planets are not at the head of the constellation at this particular time. Now, I've heard it said that um, it was there in 2017, so that fulfilled that part of the Revelation 12 sign. It doesn't necessarily have to be present now as we talk about the part of the dragon and the child being harpazoed up to heaven. However, some may argue that that takes away from the sign. In fact, Scotty Clark, who claims to have been the person who's discovered this, which I don't believe he was. I believe there was someone else, but I'm not going to split hairs. If he wants to take credit, he could run with that football. But Scotty Clark, because there's so much going on right now on the internet over this, Scotty Clark did a little thing on his Facebook channel, basically to refute this. Uh, and the Scotty Clark back in 2015, 2014, 2015, 2017 is not quite the same Scotty Clark of 2023. And I'm not saying DNA wise he's not the same Scotty Clark. I'm just saying he's gone in a very, very different direction of what I would categorize as hyper dispensationalism. He would call it rightly dividing the word of truth. Um, but he pretty much uh, does not agree with um, this really in the same way he did back in 2017. So he basically made a short video debunking this, saying that this is just people who are just anxious and want the rapture to happen are seeing something that's not there, and the people producing this is more concerned about getting numbers on their channels and hits and views than actually really believing this. I'd like to beg to differ. I'm not saying that this is of the Lord or not, but I'm not going to poo-poo this because you know um, because it doesn't kind of meet my framework of looking at the end times. To me, it does play into how I view the end times. It doesn't compute into how Scotty Clark, or Scott Clark now, changed his name a little bit, views the end times, right? So it is what it is. But here's the deal: you're going to have some people are looking at this and saying, "This is interesting. We got to keep an eye on this. What if this is it?" You got other people who have written this off or poo-pooed this or won't even watch any videos or hear anybody out because as soon as you say Revelation 12 sign, they rent their vesture. And then you'll have some that might be selling their house and then heading to the mountaintops on this day to try to give the Lord a little bit of help in the harpazo process, which he doesn't need any help. But whatever camp you're in, my recommendation would be, let's not be extreme with this. Let's take a look at this. Let's study it for ourselves. If it has merit, it's going to play out. If it doesn't have merit, um, it's not going to play out. So here's a very simple thing. Ask the Lord through the power of the Holy Spirit to give you discernment. I'm sure He doesn't want His children to waste time on something that is not going to be profitable for them. Can the Lord give us some clues and hints before that day? Why not? Why not? I think he's done that in history. Why not give us something such as this? But I just want to be careful. I don't want to be emotionally led. I don't want to be tattooing this on my arm just because I would love to see this really be, you know, what the Lord has for us to know how close He's there. So, is there room for a balance? Absolutely. Um, Time will tell. That's the nice thing. This is not something happening in 2024 or 2026. This is happening in a couple weeks. So we can say, we're still here or we're not here. And if we're still here, we could still consider this. But like I said, we rule it out of the rapture happening on that day. We can't rule out that this is not pointing to something. And the Lord, in His graciousness, seems to every so often maybe give us a little bit more insight into something that hasn't been considered or discovered yet. And then seems to keep us encouraged as we come along, as we continue to move forward, watching for His return. Regardless of this, there's still some significant events happening in the month of September that we want to keep our eye on. And what's going on in the United Nations, I think, is very significant. I also think that we have to keep our eye on what's going on in Israel, what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on with China and Russia, what's going on in the elections, the election process in the United States, what's going on with the potential buggy gaining more steam, what's going on just as we see these birth pangs increase and become more intense. There's plenty to look at. And because we get something like this, coupled with all the other things that I mentioned, it just sort of, at least in my mind, sort of keeps on speaking of a convergence that's been taking place. And as you get a convergence, right, you get a convergence, and I think I've done a video on this before. See, you get a convergence of things coming together, but a convergence could only last so long between the time where you actually have those things meet or they start to cross paths and go away from each other. All right. So convergence is nice, but I think you could actually put that in the category of that some things, prophetically speaking, have a shelf life. All right. So I'm going to take this graphic down. So what do you guys think of this? There's a lot of talk right now in the Watchman community about it. I think the Lord to choose a saint like Patrick, humble, excited brother. Can it mean something? I hope it does. Would I be disappointed if it comes and goes and we go into 2024? Yeah, but you know what? Disappointment's a part of this journey. Um, just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it will never happen. Let me say that again. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it will never happen. And in fact, when God used the example of the flood, right, and sort of scoffing about what people would say, um, you know, we have to understand that the Lord used the example of Noah and how people at that time, how suddenly judgment took place, right? Um, and so we have to consider that. In Second Peter chapter 2, it says, let's see, in verse 5, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. If he rescued righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, and especially those who will indulge in the lust of defiling passion and despise authority, bold and willful. They do not tremble as they blaspheme the glorious ones, whereas angels, though greater in might and power, do not pronounce a blasphemous judgment against them before the Lord. But these, like irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be caught and destroyed, blaspheming about matters of which they are ignorant, will also be destroyed in their destruction. Okay? So we have to keep mind of this warning here, is that the Lord doesn't mess around with sin. Angels that sin were not spared. And then the time of Noah, the world was not spared except for 8. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were condemned and brought to ashes. But this is the beautiful thing, is the Lord knows how to rescue the godly, right? From trials, and keep those, the trial that's about to come over the earth, right? Will he not? Will he not be able to rescue us? Of course. That's why we have the rapture. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3. Knowing this, first of all, that scoffers will come in the last days with scoffing. What do scoffers do? They scoff. What will happen in the last days? Scoffers will come. What will the scoffers do in the last days? They will scoff. And what does it say about these scoffers? They follow their own sinful desires. All right? Do you think a scoffer wants the Lord to return if they're following their own sinful desires? Of course not. They will say, where is the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep or died, all things are continuing as they were from the beginning of creation. For they deliberately overlook this fact that the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water, and through water by the word of God, and that by means of these the world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. And by the same word the heavens and earth that now exist are stored up for fire, being kept until the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. So, just because the world had not been flooded up to the time of Noah doesn't mean that it wouldn't be flooded ever. And just because the world hasn't been burnt up with fire through God's judgment doesn't mean that he has set up an appointed time when he indeed will unleash his wrath, and fire will consume the occupancy of those who dwell on the earth. It says here in verse 10, the day of the Lord will come like a thief, and then the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burnt up and dissolved, and the earth and the works that are done on it will be exposed. Now, this is for us knowing all this. Since all these things are thus to be dissolved, what sort of people ought you to be in lives of holiness and godliness, waiting for the hastening, the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be set on fire and dissolved, and the heavenly bodies will melt as they burn. But according to his promise, we are waiting for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. So basically, we are to live godly lives in this corrupt world until he comes. And we need to do and go about his business. Now, brothers and sisters, I fail daily at that. But it doesn't mean I don't have that responsibility day by day when the next opportunity comes to speak for the Lord, to do his will, to love as Christ loved, and to warn. Brothers and sisters, the time is running short. And when we see things such as this, whether they hold a lot of merit or not, I still think that the urgency to do what we ought to do, whatever God has called you and I to do, we do until that day comes. And when that day comes, we get snatched away and we're with him forevermore. But woe to those who remain on the earth during this time to come, as it will be the worst days that this world has ever faced or ever will face. Now, if you have tuned into this and you're just listening and curious or wondering about, is the world in fact heading towards the prophecies that are spoken about in the end times in the Bible, I want you to know this, is that even though that's important and we talk about and we try to figure things out based on what Scripture says and what's going on in the world currently, the most important thing that we know without a doubt is Jesus is the Son of God who was sent to earth by his Father on a rescue mission, really. He lived a perfect, sinless, honoring, pleasing life to the Father, and then voluntarily and willfully, for our sake, went to the cross and was crucified, shedding his precious blood for the remission of sins and to justify us before God. He died, was buried, and rose again 3 days later, proving that everything that he said about himself was in fact true, and he's coming back again. The only way that your sins could be paid for in full is through the blood of Christ. He has asked us one thing, is to place our trust and faith in him and him alone and what he has done for us on Calvary. There's wonder washing power in the blood, right? It's all about the blood, what he did by shedding it for us. The greatest act of love ever. Do you believe in him? Do you trust him? I suggest you do, because the time is short. And that's the only way to get saved. And it's good news, because he did all the work. And it's a free gift to you. All you have to do is trust in him. Guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope really that the time before the rapture is very, very short. Hopefully soon we could hear that shout and be out of here. But until then, I will say this. I hope to see you here, there, but especially in the air. God bless.